Hello, thank you for joining me today. We're here with a very exciting interview with a team of female scientists, as well as fellow nerdy girl Dr. Amanda Simanek of UW-Milwaukee. And I'm joined by several of the authors from a recent opinion piece that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Jessica Mallish of St. Mary's College of Maryland, Dr. Kristy Lewis of the University of Central Florida, Dr. Pimtiwitt McCarthy of Morgan State University, Dr. Stephanie Shepard from Auburn University, Dr. Breanna Harris of Texas Tech University, and Dr. Shanen Sheer of St. Mary's College of Maryland. Thanks for joining me so much today, ladies. We were really interested at Dear Pandemic reading your opinion in PNAS because in that opinion, you highlight this idea that women in academia already do more of the teaching and service work than their male counterparts do. And that's particularly true for faculty of color. And those service obligations have expanded to take up more time during the era of COVID-19. And now also the layer of major reforms to the academy in terms of racial justice. And I just want to pull out this quote from the article. You say, by enlarging the academic pillars of service and teaching, COVID-19 will leave little, if any, time to pursue and maintain research funding or other scholarly activities. And this is definitely compounded by the fact that women, including academic women, do more of the childcare and household labor. And those demands have also obviously increased. My school district just decided this morning that they're going to start the school year online next year. So I'm looking at homeschooling my kids and my full-time job and my partner's full-time job. So another year or more of this tremendous time squeeze for women, in particular, women who are parents. So I just want to ask you, why did you write this article?
I'll start out. So I was just noticing through different media outlets, particularly a Facebook group, Academic Mamas, that women were dropping their research obligations. They were unable to get any research done once school shut down and teaching went remote. I didn't hear the same outcry coming from my male colleagues, and oddly, I kept hearing that they were getting more done. They'd been freed up. And so I started to get really alarmed that women were carrying the weight of the child care and more online teaching, and that we were cutting our research short, and that's going to matter at tenure. So I started to get really concerned that we were going to see many women not get tenure following this pandemic, especially if the research productivity in some groups was going up and then going down in others. So I was alarmed. And when I talked to my institution about what they were going to do about that, I was told, we're going to let you stop the tenure clock. And I already have a bad taste in my mouth for tenure clock stopping. I don't want to slow things down anymore. And so I asked if they were going to do anything about equity, and they said that it wasn't something that was being discussed. And so I was very motivated to make my voice heard in as big a way I could. And so I thought, PNAS opinion piece, and I called Bree.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a fabulous idea. I'm really interested in promoting women in science and looking at gender bias and how that impacts career trajectories and productivity. And I said, absolutely, I'm in, let's do this. I was teaching 2 classes online, and luckily my son is not in school, so I wasn't homeschooling him, but he was home every day. But we said, let's do it. And Jessica reached out to a bunch of other women she knew, and I reached out to other women I knew, and we had this amazing Google Doc of just people writing furiously. Everyone was very invested.
That's terrific. I see some parallels with how the Dear Pandemic team came together. most of you are actually in biology or some of the other hard sciences, whereas in Dear Pandemic, we're social scientists. So in our field, women actually are the majority, at least in public health. How do you feel like this was received in your departments?
I'll comment on that as the geoscientist in the group. There was actually at least one or two other people in geosciences that were part of the author group, but people in my department were super excited to read it, but I'm not sure what they're going to do with it. And I hope that things are going to be done with it. But here's the interesting thing about that is that people are reading this and paying attention. I was in a workshop this week, a teaching workshop about moving our classes online. And I'm there with a senior faculty member from another institution, another state. And he was commenting that like, he's so excited. Everyone's getting a tenure clock extension. And the 3 women in the breakout group, all pre-tenure, all were like, that's not so great. And one of them starts talking about this article. And I was like, hey, I helped write that. So clearly this is a really, this is already having a wide impact on what people are talking about in terms of what we're going to do about the impacts of COVID.
Can one of you ladies give our audience sort of a primer on what tenure clock means? You know, and why this is so important?
And maybe with a parallel to what, what's the parallel in the non-academic world?
I can do that. So the way that tenure works, tenure is meant in academia, and it's meant in a way to provide, if you're a tenure track faculty member, basically you work for about 6 years to carry out a productive research program, which in many instances is just writing a ton of paper and bringing in as many research grants as possible. Then about 4 or 5 different groups of your peers will vote in a room and whether or not you have done enough work to actually get a promotion. And that goes through multiple levels, kind of all the way up to what we call the Board of Governors or Board of Trustees. And so it is academia's way to get a promotion. And so I always talk to my non-academic friends that, hey, if you are working in business and you do this really great bang up job on this project, right? Maybe you could go to your boss and say, hey, I did this really great thing. What about a raise? And then he or she or they will say, maybe this is a good idea for you to get a raise. And so they could make it happen right there. But for academics, not only do we have to maintain a productive research program by writing papers, and that's how we're judged, we have to be judged by multiple groups of our peers. So it's just not one person, it's multiple people through the system. And so for me, it's kind of like running a small business and then figuring out how to please everybody that you're serving.
And I think this chance only comes around every 6 years in academia. So it's really difficult if you have to step back or reduce your productivity during that time. And certainly the pandemic has been a reason why probably many women in careers have had to do that across the board, right? And so I think I have a question related to, academia can be a really flexible career choice. And so, I think a lot of times there's ideas that it's beneficial, it's flexible, and probably some other women choose careers that offer some flexibility because they want to have families or it just works out that way. But I wondered if you guys could comment on sort of the double-edged sword side of that, particularly during the pandemic, and what it's meant to be the one maybe that has more flexibility and how that has translated in your daily life.
I can say something about that. I feel as if there are no more guardrails during this pandemic. I mean, academia has flexibility, yes, so you can try to get that balance, which really doesn't happen. But now I feel as if there is no way to have that balance anymore, because I mean, before, if you had some sort of, workshop that maybe your chair or boss wants you to attend, you could say, oh, well, I'm on vacation for this period of time. There is no more, there's no more vacation. There's nowhere to go. Everyone knows you're home, so you can do what's being asked of you. And it's really, I know for me, it's been really hard not to overwork myself because I'm not in the lab as much. I feel as if I'm not, falsely, I feel as if I'm not being productive enough, right? So I'm filling that time, or time in parentheses because I don't have the time, but filling that time in with something else. And it can really devolve very quickly. So I always have to sort of check myself and make sure I'm giving myself enough time to breathe.
I feel there was a really great quote floating around Twitter, I think, that it's not so much working from home as it now is living at work. And that's sort of what I feel. Is this just you wake up, you work, the kid gets up, you do your stuff, you tag in with your partner if you have one, or how that's happening, and then you repeat every day.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from any of you who have, how do you manage that?
Oh, I can jump on that. My husband and I have an intricate calendar. We rotate who's working in 2-hour blocks, and we set up a calendar every week. So he's working from home, I'm working from home. He also works at the college in the research and grants office. And we just have, 2-hour rotation, and one of us is the parent in charge. We have a sticky note on a sign and we move it. And if a child walks up to us during our 2-hour block to talk to us, we just point at the sign. Go ask that person. But it's really hard because we'll get up before the kids and start working. And then our chart starts at 8 a.m. and then rotates through till 5 o'clock. And we rotate all day. And then once the kids go to bed, we just, we keep working, because to try and get 8 hours in on this rolling 2-hour block, it's just like Bree just said, we're living where we work, right? So it's just, you just a little window that you can get.
Yeah. Amanda, I know your partner works outside the home on a more structured schedule. Do you have any comments on how this has been for you?
So my partner is an essential worker, and he has to work outside the house once or twice a week. I'd say March through June was just insanity, with an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old doing homeschool, and a 4-year-old who had nothing to do and wanted to play Legos or bug his brother for every second of the day, and we had no childcare, no anything, and I think because his job had to be done between 9 and 5, I'm the one who could, work between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. or, and then I think that was part of the reason why I asked my question is, because we're in the position that we don't have to be at a physical location or do a designated task necessarily, besides that teaching a course has a time constraint on it. And so, I think we're the ones who get stretched the farthest, probably because of that.
I would like to add, I had joined this writing adventure because we had just had a pep talk from our provost that told us that we must remain as teacher scholars, even though we were banned from the campus. And so, being someone who do not have childcare woes, but I have family far away that I was constantly worried about, and she had her baby early and whatnot. And so trying to be a supportive person long distance, trying to be a teacher scholar, knowing that I cannot go to my source of scholarship, which is the lab, and still keep up on teaching, which, as you all are pointing out, that teaching load was getting heavy. At one point, I literally ran from my phone every time it rang because it was a notification of an email, because I had a class that was large, and no fault to their own, but they decided email was the best way to reach me. So every other day getting 30 plus emails in a short amount of time does take a toll. So that lifestyle over more than a week is not a good place to be, and to have the same schedule as everyone else through June, trying to balance that, and also having the added guilt knowing that everyone else have a kid, now I must take on that burden for those who don't have a kid. It has been a struggle just to remind myself to have a balance, take time to breathe, find that productivity balance without feeling guilty that I actually had a moment to have dinner at a dinner time. Has been the trick that I've been working on for the past month.
Yeah, one of the divisions that I've observed, it feels like to me there are a lot of people who are lonely right now, and then there are parents who've never been less lonely, right? Where it's like you just wish you could get a minute. But I think that guilt is also a real challenge too. So we talked a little bit about short-term strategies to manage all of this disruption and the trying to juggle everything. I'd love to talk a little bit about the longer-term solutions. You propose some in your paper that are probably pretty specific to the academy, but if we can generalize, what do you think the solution is?
Well, I'll speak to that because I was very interested in the solutions because of the fact that I was already in a different situation than most of my peers. Because I have a kid with special needs, my time has been compressed for 2.5 years now. And I feel like that one of the solutions we proposed, which actually goes beyond just straight up if you're a professor, I think this applies to a lot of jobs, is that we need to have better conversations to develop flexibility and standards that meet our needs, right? So if we want more diversity in general, if we want more women, or if we want more people who have different life commitments, whether they're caregivers or not, the key is that we can't all put in 40, 50, 60-hour work weeks every week. But we can all still contribute. And so I think the big deal is, and of course, the specifics then are defined by your profession, but we need to actively look for ways to build in flexibility as long as people are doing their job. I mean, because I would argue that all of us are doing our job. We're just doing it in very different ways, in very different time frames, and sometimes not to the level of 60-hour work weeks, which really maybe we don't need to go back to.
I think what you're talking about, Stephanie, raises a good point about, looking ahead. If schools are going to be virtual, or in reality, we will be still experiencing and being in this pandemic for the foreseeable future. How, not just in academia, but across the board, do we need to be thinking about redefining what success is, or what the parameters are for, meeting your job requirements?
Yeah. I think one of the big takeaways, which is not new in any way, but is that it can't just be individual department or person Band-Aids, that we can't solve this with individual changes. We need structural change, kind of a reframing, as Stephanie was talking about, not just in academia, but again, to accommodate people who have lots of different responsibilities, or the way in which they need to do their job and also their life. But yeah, so some of our pieces or some of our suggestions are really specific, but other ones are a bit more broad, that we need to take a step back and have honest discussions about where inequities and where bias show up, and what can we do structurally to change those. And I think it will take a big effort, and not just one department on campus. You'll need the campus effort, or you'll need the system-wide effort to really make sweeping change.
I just want to follow up on that. When we were writing this paper, we didn't obviously foresee the death of George Floyd, pummeling us into this extremely important conversation that's been going on for a long time, and that people are extremely tired of fighting a battle and not feeling supported. And I think we point out in the paper a couple of times that, not only are these impacts worse for our Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, but it's it's a way in which we need to think about systemic change, as Bree said, in the system. We've had these conversations about inequities for women, inequities for our Black and Brown friends and colleagues, but like, what are we actually going to do in academia to start making that change? And I think we're making that lunge much stronger in society, but I almost feel like in the academy and I think other industries are starting to make moves faster than the academy. It seems like, you know, the Washington Redskins dropping their name. You know, I think there are big changes being made in corporations because they need to. And I just wonder why is academia seeming so slow? And our charge is like, use this as a springboard to make a change. I think they cut it from the paper, but what did you say? The sledgehammer?
Oh yeah, it was like drive.
In between the inequities between, in our case, men and women faculty. You know, that's what COVID-19 is doing for us. And I think what can apply, if we're talking about what can apply across all careers, is that this, not only can this be a conversation, we need to have action behind the conversation. And I'm thinking that academia is still being slow there.
Yeah, it's a real challenge for these very hierarchical kinds of institutions like universities to make the kind of rapid decisions. So I just want to wrap up there and thank you all very much for your time talking to us today. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have the best of success with the work that you're doing and fight the good fight for gender equality going forward.
Thank you all for drawing attention to these issues.
Yeah.